Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lead at Any Level Live on this Monday at noon Eastern. My name is Amy C. Waninger. I'm the Inclusion Catalyst. I'm also the founder and CEO of Lead at Any Level. If you are joining me on this stream, please let me know where you're coming from and where you're watching in the comments, and hopefully it'll show up in my StreamYard window. I would love to know who I'm talking to today. Today, I have a really important topic for you, and it's one that I was thinking about in light of the holidays coming up and the holidays that have just passed, but also a number of recent conversations I've had around team building events. So we're coming into that time of year where a lot of teams are having office parties or thinking about the office parties they're going to have. We're thinking about, gift exchanges and secret Santas and, all of these things that are very, first of all, they're very rooted in Christian traditions, but also in a lot of secular traditions related to, sort of a Christian heritage. And that's all fine. But what I wanted to caution you about, just a few things around these holiday parties and some of the things that I've seen that have been really problematic at clients' sites, at past employers, at potential client sites, and just things that I've heard talking to other folks in my network. So what I want to share with you today is how to make these celebrations and these outside of work, some people call them mandatory fun, but sometimes they're billed as team building activities, how to make them a little more inclusive. I'm going to start with just a case study around a client that I had who shall remain nameless, but I was working with another colleague of mine, Jessica Pettit, and she was doing listening sessions with this client. She was talking to people about their culture in the company and how did they experience the workplace, and what problems did they see and what did they hope they could change. If they could change one thing, what would they change? And one thing that came up consistently was this notion of team building activities being restricted to after hours and involving alcohol. And I want to talk to you for just a minute about why that particular approach to team building is so problematic. But then I'm going to touch on some other things that I've seen. So go with the flow here with me for just a minute, but I want to share, some of the behaviors and some of the expectations I think that are frustrating for employees who don't necessarily always feel like they can speak up. So let's talk first about this notion of outside of work social events. So these events, a lot of times, not everywhere, but a lot of times are characterized by an expectation to attend after hours dinner. There's often a lot of times peer pressure to consume alcohol, and sometimes even to excess. Sometimes these turn into all-out drunken bashes, right, that lead to sexual liaisons between colleagues, inappropriate relationships outside of work, in ways that might damage reporting structures even. And leaders should need to be careful with this, because what you need to understand is that these events are super fun for some people, but they're not inclusive. People who have caregiving responsibilities, people who have religious or cultural objections, not just to consuming alcohol themselves, but to being in places or around people where alcohol is being consumed. Anyone who has a history of alcohol or substance abuse and is trying to stay sober, people with neurological differences like, ADHD or being on the autism spectrum, people with, physical diagnoses, medical diagnoses like diabetes, can have real problems with this. Even people with just low levels of social anxiety are all put in an unfair disadvantage when your informal company culture or your team building or your bonding activities are all centered around alcohol and after hours work events. So keep in mind too, people are exhausted. We've been living with, various degrees of COVID protocols for 2.5 years now. The lines between work and home have blurred, almost obliterated in some cases. People feel like they have to be on 24/7. We're seeing pressures at home that we've never seen before. We've got global inflationary pressures. We're seeing geopolitical conflict around the globe. There's a lot of tension just globally. And people are dealing with very heavy workloads because there just aren't enough people to do all the jobs. And so, when you expect your employees to be on outside of work, then essentially there is no outside of work. When work responsibilities, creep outside of work hours and, you're working across multiple time zones, you're working on projects, with tight deadlines and people are putting in extra hours, all of these things become a bigger and bigger burden on people who have responsibilities at home, or They become a tremendous burden on the people who don't have responsibilities at home because they're the ones who get left doing all the work. If everybody else says, no, I can't, I've got soccer practice, or, I got to take my mom to the doctor. So we want to make sure that we're being inclusive in how we delegate work, but also in our expectations outside of those work hours. My advice here is not that you have to do away with after hours activities, or even that you have to remove alcohol from every event, although in some cases that might be a good thing to consider. But establish multiple inclusive paths for building relationships up, down, and across the organization, as well as for team building. Make sure your options are valued and supported. All of these different options are supported and valued equally, just like if you went out for drinks with your VP or, went and did karaoke with the boss. So that's one thing that I want to make sure people are very aware of, is that alcohol involved events are not inclusive. By their very nature, they are not inclusive. Now, that's not to say they don't have a place. I get that. But we need to make sure that we're giving everybody an opportunity to participate in the office culture, giving everybody a chance to build relationships. So now I want to talk about holiday office parties, or office holiday parties, because that's important too. That's an important piece of this. Um, you know, I was part of a group last year. We were getting ready to do a meet. It was a kind of an outside of work group, right? It was a networking group that I belonged to. And folks in their, excitement to put together a holiday party wanted to come up with some ways that we could sort of do some icebreakers and have a little fun and have some laughs. And one of the games that was suggested was this pick a picture from when you were young, and we'll put all the pictures on the wall, right? A holiday picture, a Christmas picture, or a winter picture, when you were young, and put it up on the wall, and we'll all try to guess whose pictures it was. Now, we started this when this started, the question was the request was a Christmas photo. And then, we thought, well, okay, not everybody has celebrated Christmas or celebrates Christmas or celebrated Christmas as a child. Some people don't have access to photographs of them as children for various reasons. But then, it became apparent very quickly that this group was overwhelmingly white. We had just one Black woman in the group, and she said, well, it's not going to be very difficult to figure out whose picture is mine. And the person who was organizing this event felt terrible because she just hadn't thought about it in that way. So we changed this particular activity to be a photo or a story from your childhood. And we changed it to be winter themed. So it wasn't around a particular holiday or a particular set of religious beliefs, but it also didn't necessarily, force anyone to share something more personal than they wanted to share. And we were able to guess about personal characteristics, the personalities of the stories and the way the stories were told, rather than on visual cues about who the people might be. So as you're thinking about your holiday parties, number one, realize that there are a wide variety of holidays. They are not all celebrated around Christmas time. You want to make sure that you're being inclusive around the timing, around the theming, but also around the activities of your holiday events, of your, end of year celebrations, whatever they are. Make sure that you're just considering everybody in the room and making sure that everybody feels comfortable. And if in doubt, ask. Float your ideas with a few different people in the group. Think about from their perspective, or ask them to share from their perspective. How would this land for you? Does this make you, does this make you comfortable? Is this something that you think would be fun? And it's not always about our identities, right? Sometimes it's about our work styles. People don't want to share about their personal lives because they're private people, or they don't want to participate in something that makes them look silly because they're very reserved. Or, maybe they don't want to do, some sort of game where they have to talk because they're introverted. So, be mindful of the people on your team, the people that you're working with, the people that you're planning things for, and make sure they feel included in the celebration as well. Ask them what role they'd like to play. Ask them if they'd like to do something different. Ask people who have never led if they'd like to lead. There's so many opportunities in this. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in the right way and in a way that invites participation rather than shuts people down or shuts people out. And the best way to do that is to be intentional, and to make sure that we're thinking about it up front. Okay, so that's my essential insight for inclusive leaders for Lead at Any Level Live today. Let me tell you what's coming up the rest of this week. So I do want to acknowledge, first of all, it is Halloween. So if you're in the United States and you celebrate Halloween, happy Halloween. If you celebrate Dia de los Muertos, Feliz Dia de los Muertos to you. Whatever you're celebrating today, I hope that you have a wonderful time with your community, with your family. Or in your own personal reflection space. But I also want to acknowledge that today is the last day of LGBTQ plus History Month. Now, most people know that Pride Month is June. We see a lot of parades and a lot of celebrations, but LGBTQ History Month happens in October. And I have a special guest, Andrew Grant, who wrote a blog post. It's available on Lead at Any Level Live. I'll be sharing it later today in honor of LGBTQ History Month. But he wrote a blog post around some of the icons in the music industry and how they've paved the way for LGBTQ acceptance and for other people to come out in society at large. And it's a fun article. It's a fun infographic, and I'm excited. Thank you, Andrew, for your contributions to the Lead at Any Level blog. So look for that later today. Tomorrow, I'm hoping to get a newsletter out. I'm not sure the topic yet. I'll let you know. But this week, all week at 4 p.m. Eastern, on the weekdays, join me for an episode of Leader Tips. These are 3-minute or less videos. And this week, I'm going to be talking about the maturity model for diversity and inclusion, the 5 levels of maturity that you might be experiencing in various aspects of your diversity and inclusion efforts at work. So be sure to stay tuned for that every day at 4 p.m. Eastern. Those come across as little quick videos. And then Thursday at noon Eastern, join me for a video podcast of Including You. And this week I have Wanda Lee Florestein. I understand she just released a book. She didn't tell me about this in the podcast, but Wanda Lee Florestein works for gridalternatives.org. She's part of the sustainable energy movement, and she talks about what they've done to attract and retain a diverse workforce in the sustainable energy sector. She does not talk about her new book, but I encourage you to follow her and check her out. And if you miss the live on Thursday at noon Eastern, right here on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you can catch it on my YouTube channel later, Lead at Any Level. Or if you prefer your podcast in audio form, you can subscribe to the Living Corporate Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And Including You is a video podcast on Thursdays at noon Eastern we release. And then Fridays, it becomes an audio podcast as part of the Living Corporate podcast series. So you won't want to miss that. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for tuning in. Good luck with your team building end of year celebrations. Good luck making those inclusive and drawing more people in and helping more people feel connected on your teams. I am so proud of the work that you're all doing in this space. I look forward to finishing out the year strong. So with that, I will say happy Halloween, happy LGBTQ History Month. Have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you later in this week.